Hi guys, welcome to another Car Ride Conversations and happy Valentine's Day. I did an original edit of this talk and then I just felt like it needed to be readjusted. And oh goodness, sorry, I had someone about run right up on me. So I decided to go back and restructure this conversation just a little bit because I wanted to focus primarily on conversations with Cindy, between Cindy and whether it be Chris or Shanann, or with Sandy. I know there's quite a bit that has been mentioned over time, and I just want to hit on a couple of those conversations. And one of the first ones that stands out is the one about Shanann's engagement ring and how much money it costs. And I think that's really an important conversation that you have with your son or daughter when they're young adults, before, and the operative word is before, they find themselves in a serious relationship where these things start to come up. Because if as a parent you've already educated them and had this conversation, then when it's time for them to have this conversation as they're dating, then they're going to be more comfortable and confident to say, these are my beliefs, this is how I view this, and then to be able to discuss it with their partner to see if they're on the same page, if they're, and then what is the compromise going to look like. And as far as the engagement ring goes, myself having two young men, two boys, the way I've explained it to them is there's nothing wrong with a woman expecting 3 months of your salary towards an engagement ring or to pay for an engagement ring. So the way I look at it is, if you save 3 months of your salary, you should be able to take that 3 months of your salary and go purchase a wedding ring that she's going to love. And operative word is purchase it. You do not pay down on it. You don't finance it. You pay cash for it. You take it out of your savings and you spend that money at one time to purchase that ring. And here's why. Purchasing that engagement ring for your future bride is the very first gesture and step that you are taking as a man to show her, I am capable of providing for you. I am capable of saving and planning, and you are worth it. You are a gift to me, and here is a gift to you that I have worked hard for to be able to give to you. And it's an investment into the commitment that you plan to give to your marriage moving forward. And a lot of people will try to turn that into a superficial, oh, it shouldn't be about money, etc. It's not about the money. It's about the concept of hard work, of saving. It's being able to provide that. And so you don't have to agree with me, but the way I have taught my own boys very biblically is, it's their job, it's their responsibility to lead the household as well as provide. And if you cannot provide a lifestyle and a home for your bride that is equal to or better than what she is raised up in and what you're asking her to leave, then you have no business getting married. So if, as a man, you cannot provide a living experience equal to or better than what you're asking that's the whole concept of a man asking for a daughter's hand in marriage, is to be able to say, I am taking the responsibility of providing for her off of you as a parent, and I am assuming that role as her husband. Like, it's all very symbolic, and it's been very perversed in the media and commercialized and all of the things, but it's very symbolic, and that is just how important these conversations are. And so I just would like to know, what was that conversation between Ronnie and Cindy and Chris? And the problem I have with this case, and again, I share my opinions on this, but God is never mentioned in this whole relationship, family, growing up. God is never, ever brought into it until Shanann is dead. And now, I know that Sandy has the persona of being this devout Catholic that, she believes. She's a believer. And many people are. You don't necessarily have to be going to church to believe in God. But to have a relationship with Him, or to have a relationship with the Scripture, and to understand what it's talking about, it is important when you're considering how, as a family, are you raising your children? What lessons are you teaching them? And so, going back to the engagement ring conversation between Cindy and Chris, was the only thing, my question to Cindy as a mom would be, was the only thing that you talked to him about the cost of the ring? Like, we all know it was roughly a $10,000 ring, because you couldn't believe that he put that much money down for a ring, or paid that much for a ring. And those are two things right there. I would like to know, did he pay $10,000 down for the ring and then had to pay it off because it was a little bit more? Or did he pay $10,000 cash for the ring? And what is their opinion or thoughts on that? And I think that's very important, because we cannot dismiss Chris Watts' mindset early on about finances, because that was one of the first financial decisions that he was ever going to make regarding his future family with Shanann, was how much he spent on that engagement ring and how he paid for it. So that's really important. And I would love to sit down and talk to Cindy about that, because I'm sure, in retrospect, she would love to have gone back and had a more extensive or more meaningful conversation with Chris about the engagement. And so, one of the main reasons I do these online conversations episodes is because these are the things that come to my mind and my heart, because it's easy to be a mom and wrapped up in your day-to-day life, and then a conversation comes up and you just kind of snap out an answer or snap out an opinion, and it's a missed opportunity to genuinely have a connection with your child. And I am saying child because no matter how old they get, they're still going to always be your child. And so the engagement ring, definitely a conversation I would like to know with Cindy. How much of it was just was it one of those things like, Chris, why in the world are you paying $10,000 for a ring? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, was that the extent of it? And it was, well, Mom, this is the one she picked out, so I wanted to get her the one that she wanted. And Cindy was just like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, was that how the conversation went? Or did she communicate with Chris a little bit more on the importance or the significance of an engagement ring and the purchase of it? Because another question that should have been asked to Chris was, what does Shanann say about an engagement ring? Like, what does an engagement ring mean to Shanann? And these are questions that if you're raising young men and they're in a serious relationship, or, you know, you're in my boat where they're late teens, you know, early adulthood, these are things to go ahead and start talking to them about. Because even when you're dating, it's important to know, what does an engagement ring mean to you? And do you know, of all the times I've been dating or married, no one has ever asked me what the significance of an engagement ring has mattered or meant to me. No one. Not an ex-husband, not anybody in their family. No one. No one has ever asked what's the significance and the importance of an engagement ring to me. And I will tell you, the answer to that has been the root cause and problem that has ultimately led to divorce. All 3 times. All 3 times. And it's taken a while to come to that realization, and it was really putting together that first rough edit of this conversation episode, but it's the truth. The very thing that is what makes an engagement ring so important to me is also the very thing that has not ever been achieved, provided, or attained in any of the past relationships or marriages. And so moving forward, I now personally have a much more clear expectation for what I want in a spouse. And I'm just curious how Shanann would have, in that moment, because keep in mind, she'd been divorced, I want to say, I'd have to sit down and look at the timeline, but she'd been divorced for a couple years maybe, and still reeling from that divorce. I would just like to know what did it mean to her? What did her engagement ring mean to her? She was very proud of it. You can tell, because when she was showing off her nails and whatnot, she made sure that she posed with her engagement ring. It mattered to her. So what was it that she needed from Chris that he took for granted? Because that's where resentment built up. And that's where a problem. I mean, the ultimate ending of their marriage was brewed through that resentment. So it really, really would be interesting to go back with Cindy and say, going all the way back to that conversation with Chris about that engagement ring, did he mention anything about why Shanann liked that ring? And I'm talking like beyond, oh, it's just a pretty ring, or that's just the one I want, or, not the superficial stuff. What did that ring mean to her? And I'm pretty sure the answers to those questions would have created either a pause, or it would have created a better understanding and a respect between Shanann and Cindy and Chris. Like, there would have been an understanding and a respect that could have grown, and that could have been a bonding moment for them early on. And then another question that comes up, or that I've heard discussed or mentioned with Cindy, is having talks about the house that she built, and why does she build such a big house. And my question would be, are you asking these questions because you're judging her? And because there's a difference between asking questions or being inquisitive about something because you genuinely are trying to understand who this person is and what are the circumstances surrounding said home, or are you just saying it to, being judgmental? Because you're going to get two different types of responses. If someone says something like, let's just take, for example, I started working behind the scenes. I'm putting together a charity for domestic violence victims, and it's causing me to basically take in different items at the house, and so I'm having to rearrange everything, and it just looks like a complete mess sometimes. But through it, I've developed this design idea for my kitchen, and I have this working vision, but for anyone else that it's, their vision doesn't align with it, they're like, oh, I don't get it, or, whatnot. And so you can ask me, Ashley, why do you have all this china? Like, I have little plates of china that I've been collecting to do a project with at home. But if you come in and you're like, why do you have all of this? As opposed to, hey, I noticed you have several china plates laying around. What are these for? You're going to get two different responses from me. Because if you're only coming in and you're judging just based off of what you see, and you're not asking because you genuinely care, you're just, throwing judgment out there because it doesn't align with what you would do, then I'm not going to entertain that with any type of heartfelt conversation. But if you are genuinely curious and wanting to understand it better, and you ask me that way, then yeah, we will have a different conversation. So I'd really like to know, these conversations about Shanann's home that she had prior to meeting Chris, were these conversations where it was Cindy genuinely was trying to figure out, like, how in the world is she paying for that? There's ways to ask that. But if you come across as just automatically assuming that she had to have been doing something she wasn't supposed to be doing, because how in the world could she afford that kind of house, you're not going to get anywhere with that. And it really begs the question, was this the attitude that Shanann was met with from the jump? Because if you're constantly being judged before you ever are given an opportunity to get to know somebody, you're going to shut down. You're going to throw up a wall. And Shanann wanted nothing more than to be included and brought in and made to feel like family. And you think about it, it's one of those things that blue-collar workers and family tend to go hand in hand, whereas with lawyers and you deal more with like formal dinners and things like that, or at least that's the concept, if you will. Maybe it's a misconception, but it's there. And so in her mind, you've got someone questioning how you have this in such a way that it's insulting, and yet you're looking at yourself going, I was questioning being with your son who's a mechanic. And so the judgmentalness can go both ways, and it can start flying. And when that happens, it's almost impossible to be able to build a relationship. And so the question is, these conversations with Cindy through the years, was Cindy asking these questions with hopes of nurturing and building a relationship with Shanann? Or was it the cost of the engagement ring just was like a thorn in her side? And so then it was like, wait a minute, this house is expensive. Everything in it is expensive. And how did she afford this? And what about her vehicle? Or how is she doing? Like, the delivery in these conversations would make or break the relationship from the get-go. And so I think this is really important to highlight, because especially in today's world, having, as parents, we have to remember that with our adult children, whether it's their friends or their girlfriend or boyfriend or their significant other, you have to assume, or at least it's my opinion, that you have to assume that, like, that other child or person may not have been raised with the same values and the same principles or the same guidance that you've given to your own children. So you should, if you take on the role of nurturer and educator and facilitator, then you're going to have a much better opportunity to pour into these young individuals than to come across as just one more person telling them that they're doing it wrong. Because there's nothing worse when you're doing the best that you can for someone to come and tell you, oh, you're doing that wrong. Or why are you doing that? That's so stupid. Or why are you not worried about that? I can't tell you how many times as a single mom, I would have to go to the like, I have really bad kidneys. If I were to get an infection, I had to go get treatment. I had to go to the hospital. But every time you go to the hospital, it's several $1,000s. It ends up hitting your credit. And it's horrible when you can't afford health insurance. And yet, you go on dates, and suddenly they want to know, why do you have all this money in healthcare debt? And it's like, well, I did what I had to do. It wasn't that I wanted to. No one wants to go rack up anything like that. But you got to do what you got to do to survive. And if it means that a bill knocks you on your credit and you pay $10 a month for the rest of your life, then, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. But do you create a habit of that? No, you work hard to get away from it. But when you're sitting there and you're getting to know someone and they are questioning everything that you've done in order to survive, and they're questioning it in such a manner that is extremely demeaning and judgmental, you don't even want to be around that person, because how dare you come and talk to me about what I had to do to make ends meet and survive when you weren't here helping along the way. And so really keep that in mind when you're having conversations with your children, your adult children, with their loved ones, their spouses, their significant others. Just if you're coming from the right place in your heart, then monitor and watch that delivery. And so, let's see, we've talked about the engagement ring, we've talked about the house, talking about the wedding. The weddings are always expensive. Always. And I don't know what the issue necessarily was with the food at the showers, or okay, so I don't want to blaze, or I don't want to just glaze over it. I want to actually touch on some of these things. So, for example, the food at the shower. If Shanann said that she couldn't eat certain foods, and Cindy just brazenly just put the stuff out there and just didn't care that it was cross-contaminated, yeah, that's a problem. That's a big problem, because you haven't even gotten married and you've already got someone trying to sabotage everything. That's a red flag. That is a big, big problem if that's the case. Now, and we see this resurface, and this is why this is exactly why I have these conversations, because we see this exact thing resurface with Cece and the nuts and the ice cream. It's not a matter of Cindy gave Cece the ice cream. Cindy didn't give Cece the ice cream. One of the kids went into the refrigerator, got the ice cream out, and sat down and was eating it next to Cece. The point is, what kid actually likes pistachio ice cream anyway? Like, why would you, like, if you know the kid can't have, if you know one grandbaby can't have that because of an allergy, especially in the summer. I get it. The other grandkids are around the rest of the year. You always have them. You see them all the time. I get that. But this was a short period of time over the summer that your grandbabies were going to be there, and she's asked you simply, don't get certain ice creams, please, or don't get certain products, please. The least you can do, mother to mother, is just respect it. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe that the kid has the freaking allergy. But if the mom asks you to please don't do this, you don't do it, or it will create a problem. I always had a rule with my oldest, especially the oldest, because he was my firstborn. I had a rule with my mom that if she were to give him candy, she needed to call me. And she thought it was the most stupidest rule ever. And she didn't understand it. She got mad. She got mad because I didn't want him eating so much junk food. And my mom raised me. I knew how much junk food I had. I know I had teeth rotting out of my head when I was a toddler. And I know that I, to this day, hate a dentist because I felt so much pain as a kid getting cavities filled that I don't want my children, I didn't want my toddlers going through that. So my rule with my mom and anybody was, before you give my kids candy, you call me and just make sure it's okay. It's just a mutual respect thing. And it got to the point where I told my son, you do not eat any candy, I don't care who gives it to you, until you call mama. And he would be like 4 years old and tell my mom, I can't have this sucker until I call my mom. And my mom would get frustrated, but she would let him call me. And he would call and he'd say, Mommy, Nene, give me sucker, can I have it? And, I would say, sure, just make sure you brush your teeth. But it was an area of tension, and it caused a rift between me and my mom for a while. I mean, I still talk to her, but it was just it was tension. And there shouldn't be a tension over a mother trying to raise her child the best that she can. And Shanann, love her or not, she took the babies to the doctor. She had them tested for these allergies. She was told Cece had these allergies. She was given EpiPens just in case it was needed. And she was just trying to follow the doctor's orders to protect her daughter. And you can, again, it doesn't matter what you think of Shanann. In that moment, that should have been respected. But then when you go and you look all the way back to the rehearsal dinners or the bridal shower parties, I can't remember exactly which one it was. I know both of them kind of blew up. But at the cross-contamination of the food, the fact that, Sandy brought food so Shanann could eat, and just the debacle that was, it's interesting to see it rear its face again almost 8 years later when it comes to Cece, and it causes another rift. Now keep in mind, Cindy and Ronnie, none of Chris Watts' family attended this wedding. And that says a lot. But I'd really like to know, what was the reason why they chose not to attend? And I know they say, oh, well, we just didn't feel like we just couldn't support it because of the backlash with, Jamie being asked to not attend and Shanann basically demanding all these things. But everyone knows planning a wedding is stressful. Paying for a wedding is stressful. When we talk about, let's dive into Shanann real quick. We talk about Cindy and Jamie saying that they mailed out the invitations or they passed out the invitations, but Shanann's friends just could not attend. And so when she had her shower, she was upset that she didn't have that many people in attendance. That would devastate any bride. It really would. And if you've already been taking jabs from your future mother-in-law, and you're taking these little jabs and digs, and then now your friends don't show up for your bridal shower, it is much easier to believe that they didn't send out the invitations than to try to put the accountability on your friends and say, wait a minute, what the heck? What happened? And so it's embarrassing as well. Not to mention, this is her second wedding. So there's a lot emotionally that goes into when you are having a second wedding as opposed to it being your first. And that's just an area with Shanann that, how did she perceive what was going on and what had been leading up to her reason for perceiving things that way? And all I can think of is if the engagement ring price was a dig, then you've got the house that's a dig. You've got the fact that she was married before was a dig. And you've got all of these passive aggressive, under your breath comments and judgments coming out. At some point, Shanann has every right to start believing that her mother-in-law just doesn't like her and doesn't care. And that's just a really, really sad way to start off your relationship and to start off your marriage. So when it comes to conversations with Cindy, I'm really, really curious how were these conversations? What was the context of these conversations? Were you sitting around with Jamie and just saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's acting like this? Or how in the world, anyone that's hung out with women to any extent, I mean, you sit around them long enough and it's just like, oh my gosh, what about this? And oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And if you're around the wrong people, it can get negative very quickly. And keep in mind, Shanann did not have to be Cindy Watts' cup of tea. Was she what Chris wanted? And then that is a whole conversation to have with Chris. But Shanann, it really breaks my heart sometimes because I think about that. She wanted that connection with family. She wanted that relationship with family. But because she never learned how to heal from that first marriage and divorce, she never really got a chance to heal and move past it and then put those things into play. So she jumped right into this relationship with Chris. And it's just it's worth mentioning and it's worth talking about, to say, when it comes to our friends, when it comes to their choices in life, it comes to their choices in partners, or it's important. Excuse that loud truck. I live in the country. It's important to consider that not everyone was raised the same way that you were. Not everyone had the grace and forgiveness and consistency that you may or may not have had, or maybe they had it and you didn't. And so, before we judge people and before we jump down each other's throats and criticize and openly just share nothing but negative opinions about things, keep in mind, I mean, what could you pour into that situation? And the same goes for the whole Nutgate incident thing. That's just communication. And yelling and screaming, like, that conflict came up and blew up out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't over nothing. That had been brewing. And you have to look at the parallels between what happened at her bridal showers, and then to have the same thing turn around and happen, but at this time it's putting your child at risk. I don't care who you are. As a parent, that would absolutely it would send me through the roof. And I really think that's what happened with Shanann, and she had just had it at that point. And you add that to what she was dealing with Chris and his just passiveness. And so being able to communicate is such a gift, and it's such a necessity, especially when you're trying to build a relationship with anybody. And so these different topics with Cindy, I'd really like to sit down and have just a conversation with her about different topics throughout the marriage and throughout the relationship with Shanann, or between Shanann and Chris, because wholeheartedly, I'm sure she reflects back on several of those things and knows that it could have been handled differently. But then I think too, maybe there were other conversations that we haven't heard about yet where she didn't receive the delivery of what Shanann had to say or respond. And, you start becoming reactionary. And when you get reactionary, you stop being able to be objective and thinking about things. So I'd really like to hear your opinions and your thoughts on it. These hot button issues between the engagement ring, Shanann's house before she met Chris, the MLMs, whether or not it was actually making money and benefiting them, and the bridal shower, the wedding. I'd really like to hear your thoughts and your opinion on the conversations you think happened or that you would have had with Shanann if you were Cindy. So drop those in the comments below, and until next time, happy Valentine's Day, and this is another Car Ride Conversation.